It is mid-December, mere weeks away from Christmas, and today I'm planting 203 comfrey plants. In this video, I'm going to show you why I can and why I need to plant these root cuttings this late in the growing season. I'm going to talk you through why I've selected these specific parts of my yard for this plant, how I got so many of them, what I'm going to use them for, and much more. But first, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Taylor and I teach gardeners how to grow in more sustainable and regenerative ways. There are few plants more sustainable and regenerative than comfrey, in my opinion. But I'm also going to show you several other recipes and techniques in this video that are going to be useful to you. I've made these recipes available in easy to read, downloadable, printable form for free. Just hit the link in the description or scan the code on the screen to get access to those. Why am I planting comfrey so late in the season? Well, mostly it's because we only recently got access to our property after having rented it out for a few years, but now we're back, baby. It is officially the off season though, for us here in Zone 6B. And one of those hidden benefits though to global warming is that we get these early midwinter warm patches. So I'm taking advantage of that. Ordinarily, these temperatures would be a bit too cold to want to plant into. You know, we're looking at like around low 40s, low 50s Fahrenheit, and we're heading into some hard frosts in a few weeks, most likely. But with comfrey, we don't really have to worry about that. In fact, these are just gonna do totally fine, which is great news because I need to get these in the ground so that they can start popping up next spring. And in case you don't know what comfrey is, this is somewhat of a miracle plant, highly resilient, highly beneficial, and of course, highly controversial. For those of you who feel the need to warn me and others about the potentially dangerous parts of comfrey, this is your cue to drop a comment. The bullet points: it is not recommended that you consume this plant. It's been shown to cause liver damage and cancer when consumed in extraordinarily large amounts. That said, it's got so many uses in the garden that it's well worth planting despite people freaking out on you. Comfrey is largely considered what is called a dynamic accumulator. It's not been officially labeled as such, but most people growing it will tell you it's a dynamic accumulator, meaning that it draws nutrients up from the subsoil, transfers those nutrients through its root system and up into its above ground leaves. And those leaves can then be harvested and used for many purposes that we'll get into a little later on. Specifically, comfrey contains high amounts of potassium, calcium, nitrogen, and micronutrients like manganese and magnesium. The best part about comfrey is that it produces a large amount of above ground biomass, and it regrows quickly once harvested. You can get 5, 6, 7 harvests out of a single comfrey plant each season. It attracts pollinators, it's low maintenance, and in case it wasn't obvious already, you can plant it most times of the year. Shoulder seasons are the best, so fall and spring. But if you have the chance, like me, to plant in December, you can plant them then too, I guess. A lot to love about comfrey. The one thing other than the potential side effects of consuming it that is worth mentioning is that it's important to plant comfrey strategically because, like I mentioned before, it's pretty resilient, meaning that it can be hard to remove. It grows thick, long, deep taproot systems that can break up hard ground over time and improve the soil, which means once it's there, it kind of only becomes easier for it to grow itself and harder for you to remove. Now, if you plant this variety, Bocking 14 or Russian comfrey, it will not self-seed and you don't need to worry about that. I've also been told that Bocking 4 is sterile. So if you plant those, you don't need to worry about them spreading beyond where you plant it, but you might find it hard to remove them. You really have to get all of the root out or cover the plant with tarp or cardboard for a good long while to fully kill it. That said, with all the benefits, it's not the worst thing in the world to have around, which is why I'm planting so much. The main way that I decide where to plant comfrey in every garden that I start is by looking for the underutilized parts of the yard, areas that aren't quite viable for growing food or crops. I also look for strategic places where I need a natural weed barrier. So this makes a nice plant to put along fence lines where neighbors' lawns are creeping in toward my property. Comfrey is also a very strategic plant to put around fruit trees, bushes. It's kind of an optimal permaculture guild companion plant. The main thing is that it enjoys full sun for it to be most optimal. That said, even with partial shade, 4 to 5 hours of sun per day, it will grow. Now for these root cuttings and crowns, I dug up 5 mature comfrey plants and divided up their roots. I was not very careful as I dug these up. I'm fine leaving behind root fragments in the soil because I want those to regrow. These were plants that I planted 4 or maybe even 5 years ago, and they have never been divided. We just moved back to our property at the beginning of this month, so this is the first chance that I have had to dig into the ground much at all. Some of these roots were absolutely enormous. Comfrey doesn't grow laterally, but the mother rootstock does beef out quite a bit, as you can see. This one was about as wide as my hand, so 3 to 4 inches across. There were also tons of worms crawling in and around roots here. Comfrey sloughs off its roots as one of the ways that it improves the soil that it's planted in, and this is attractive to worms and other microorganisms. We've got centipedes and pill bugs also crawling all through these. And just to get a sense of what I'm looking at, I went ahead and washed these off just a little. A lot of rich soil clinging to these. When you're looking at the roots that you've dug up, there's really not too many rules for dividing them. Even a 1-inch piece can regrow new roots. You can see all these hairs that are coming off of this piece. Those are going to start growing once they've popped into the ground. And with the colder temperatures, they probably won't start growing until spring, but that's okay because that's when we want them. I just took a beefy knife and a cutting board and I started chopping these up. There's only one thing you want to look for, which I'll get into in just a second. But the thing that I want to point out here is that the size that I'm cutting these into is substantially larger than is necessary to propagate comfrey. A 2-inch root fragment that's 1/4 of an inch thick is going to get you a comfrey plant, no problem. The reason that I'm chunking these up so big is because I want to get established comfrey plants a little bit faster. Bigger chunks are going to have a little bit more stored energy and we'll get going in the spring a little bit faster. But truthfully, I could have gotten probably 4 times as many cuttings out of these roots that I dug up. Now, I mentioned that there was one thing you want to look for when you're dividing comfrey roots, and that is the crown. There are 2 parts to a root, the root and the crown. And the reason that this matters is that the crown is basically a year-old comfrey plant. You plant this and it'll most likely bloom into a full-sized comfrey plant the same year, whereas root fragments are going to be 1 season behind. Small detail there, but it's worth paying attention to. To distinguish between the crown and a root piece, you're just looking for the area at the top of the root that starts to transition to a leaf stem. And if you're just digging up your comfrey plants, now when you're watching this, I'll try to show you some examples of the crowns. And again, these pieces are huge. I could get a few crowns from each of these if I needed more plants, but this amount should do the trick for my needs. Sometimes the crowns have a little pinkish purple tint to them. And before we plant these out, there's one optional step that we're going to take, and this is a root soak solution. I dehydrated these root cuttings and crowns for a couple days because they were pretty damp after digging them up and washing them off. And when you dehydrate a root cutting, I know that people are going to freak out about this, but if you kind of have the chance to boost the health of the plant long term a little bit. So drying them out is a slight stressor. They want to take a drink of water, and then when we give them that drink, it's full of nutrients, enzymes, microbial activity, hormones that all give it a boost. And it's going to soak them up much more than if it was fully hydrated already. I have this root soak solution made out of my Korean natural farming inputs. This contains lactic acid bacteria, fermented plant juice, apple cider vinegar, and oriental herbal nutrient. I've diluted them all per their standard dilution rates. So 1 part LAB, 1 part FPJ and vinegar to 500 parts water. And my OHN is a 1.5 years old, so I diluted it 1 to 1,500. And this is just going to give the dehydrated root cuttings something to soak up. It'll give them a little blast of immunity, some nutrients, some vigor, and keep them from being as susceptible to pathogens. I'm just soaking them for a few hours before planting. I didn't quite mix up enough here so to fully submerge all the roots and the crowns, but that's okay because they're not really soaking it up for too long. I'm just sort of turning them around and mixing them up over the course of a few hours so that they all get exposed to the mixture. And you can do this with any plant that you dig up and propagate, bare root plants. You can download the recipes for these inputs linked in the description. We've of course got videos on this channel for all of them as well. But if you would like them all in one place and would like to support our work on this channel, you can use what I use, which is my new book, A Home Gardener's Guide to Korean Natural Farming. Available now on Amazon and in ebook from my website, thegriffinfamilyfarm.com/the-book. There you go, shameless plug done. And back to the root soak solution. A side note here, but the comfrey is actually what I make the majority of my fermented plant juice out of. So sort of a full circle moment here. And now that these have fully soaked and are ready to plant, that is what I'm gonna do. Now, one last thing, if you don't know where you're gonna be planting yet, or at the time that you're watching this, you don't need to right away. You can actually store them just by putting them in plastic bags, fill it up with peat moss or coco coir, or better yet, dry leaf mold, and then pop it in the fridge, and they should stay dormant until spring. Make sure that they aren't wet in there. The roots can rot just like any other plant root, and maybe don't let them touch if you can help it. And I'm actually gonna save some of mine this way, but we know where we're planting most of these, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. I'm gonna show you the way that I am planting these. I need to get a lot planted, and I don't wanna take too much time doing it, so I'm not planting these very carefully. If you wanna guarantee that your comfrey plant establishes, you can be more careful about this. Plant them 2 inches deep, put them in the ground horizontally with any nodes sticking up, because stems will come out of those. Make sure that they've got good soil contact, and of course water them after planting unless it's gonna rain. But for me, I'm getting hundreds in the ground, and I'm just gonna use this simple method. I think I learned about this first from the Edible Acres YouTube channel. Huge shout out to Sean there, tons of wisdom that he shares on that channel. But basically, to get these going, I'm stepping my shovel into the ground a little bit, lifting up the soil, tossing the root cutting in, tamping down the soil gently. This works for crowns and roots. This is not a precision game. I'm aiming to plant one of these every foot or so, maybe 1.5 feet along the fence line and in my patch down here. The reason I'm planting this patch is because this is where my compost operation is going to exist. So for comfrey planted along the fence lines, those are going to be great chop and drop harvests. I just come in, cut them down, and use them as a nutrient-rich mulch on the garden beds. For the compost zone area, these are going to be fodder for my chickens and an ingredient in my compost piles. Great sorts of nitrogen. Comfrey leaves dissolve into compost and on top of soil, feeds biology, beautiful stuff. I already mentioned that comfrey is the main thing that I use to make my fermented plant juice right now. The first leaves that pop out of the ground in the spring, they're going to contain all of the best growth hormones, enzymes, and nutrients. So that's what we want to capture. FPJ is chopped up plant debris mixed with sugar to extract for a week or so and then strained off and reserved. I also mentioned comfrey is great for attracting beneficial pollinators. It's got a beautiful bell-shaped flower that bees love. I feed it to my chickens, and people freak out about this for some reason because too much comfrey can be harmful when consumed. But the thing is, chickens are intuitive eaters, so they will stop eating it when they don't need it anymore. I've never had a problem with chickens and comfrey. Turns their egg yolks a nice deep orange. Anyway, last thing I'm gonna do right now is just chop up some of the residue and make a good old winter batch of Jadam liquid fertilizer, leaf mold soil, comfrey, water, and thyme. And this stuff will just age all winter long. I'll use it as a soil drench in the early spring before we plant, and it'll re-impart those nutrients into the soil for a good kickstart to the growing season. Big picture, I'm hoping to create as much of a self-sustaining micro farm here, something that Cassidy and I can manage on our own, at least at first. And comfrey is just a really nice way to generate a lot of on-site fertility. We'll be planting, of course, the majority of our perennials next spring. This is one that we're grateful to be able to get out of the way early. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn a little bit more about comfrey, you can check out our Comfrey Masterclass video next. Don't forget to check out our free downloads to help you make your own gardening inputs. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.